The bin has been. Once upon a time, there was a young, shiny metal bin who lived downtown in a big, bustling city. He was situated in a busy main street and happily could just about see some of his family and friends down the road. He was a fixed bin, bolted to a metal post and adjacent to the rather noisy main road. Now, the bin had been a bin all his life. Back in the early days, he had been just a plain metal bin. Of course, metal bins can or can't rust, can't they? So shortly after he was born, he had a first layer of undercoat safeguard layered on, followed quickly by his first coating of protecting paint. Every year or so, he would have another layer of paint put on as the rust tried relentlessly to break through. Always, though, the rust is trying to get through, isn't it? Subtly dormant, but bubbling and simmering silently under the surface. Nevertheless, as he grew up a bit, he had some pretty attachment put on himself, some lovely attractive adornments that emphasised his young good looks. What's more, all those layers of paint had different colours, which there's no doubt gave the young bin an increasingly alluring appeal. For as long as he could remember, he had been a busy bin all of his life. He was constantly working and would always get emptied several times a day, so his life was continually full. However, every day in the quiet times when the bin wasn't working, when he was empty inside, he had those brief moments to ponder and deliberate his largely littered life. One day, he couldn't exactly remember exactly when, but it was the day when the young bin had understood, as grown-up bins only do. He regrettably realised that he was just a collector, an accumulator for other people's garbage. There's no easy way to put it, is there? He was a dumping ground for other people's rubbish. As the increasingly unsettled years went by, the bin realised that time was taking its toll, and he now had a weathered appearance. He certainly wasn't all smooth and straight anymore, and his looks were starting to get bedraggled, especially as keeping the ravenous rust inside was proving to be more and more difficult to contain. Over the years, the young bin had every bit of garbage you can think of chucked inside of him. You name it, the bin had seen it. And as you can imagine, the inside of the bin had also gotten damaged over the years by everyone else's rubbish. All different sorts of stains, scratches, dents and so forth. The sort of damage you think you could never get rid of. And they had become part of the character of the bin. As destiny would have it, one day the befuddled bin found a partner, an elegant plastic bin liner. Attractive as the beautiful bin liner was, she was even more captivating because she would change her outfit many times a day. Of course, as they got to know each other intimately, it was only a matter of time before they fell in love. One of the many wonderful things about having the beguiling bin liner always around was that the bin didn't get to have as much of the other people's refuse. He refused anymore, at least directly, as that was now the bin liner's devotion. That isn't to say that the bin didn't still get some rubbish, especially when the bin liner was too full, or when she was unwell, or overwhelmed, when she was suddenly passionately split open in a moment of weakness, and then for a short time, all of her accumulation would start tumbling out. But most of the time it seemed that they were happy and content with their lives. Until one terribly traumatic day, the bin liner was off getting changed, but she didn't come back. Days went by, weeks and months and years, and still the bin liner hadn't come back to the bin. After a while, the bin got to accepting that maybe she wasn't coming back at all. This was hard to accept, and the bitter bin became cold-hearted, cold as the touch of his steely sides. He didn't care about himself anymore, letting himself go, not worrying about his appearance or anything. Subsequently, many of the old layers of paint stripped off, releasing the repressed rust beneath. To ease the loneliness, the forsaken bin attempted communion with a variety of bin liners, but they never lasted, as his heart had been taken by his one and only love. So in the end, he just didn't bother anymore. He resigned himself to being abandoned and alone. As he further deteriorated, it was only a matter of time before the inner rust started to spread. And paradoxically, he became more humble and forgiving. He opened up to thinking now that maybe the reason she wasn't coming back was because not only was the bin liner having to deal with all of her and everyone else's rubbish, she was actually having to deal with all of his rubbish as well. All of the rubbish that the bewildered bin had accumulated over the course of his years. As the revelations continued, the bin finally deliberated that he now had a real dilemma, to either allowing the rust to re-establish himself further to continue to reveal his true self, or by layering himself again with paint to conceal his true self from himself. A swift demise or a long but limited suffering life. And as he contemplated, the bin was plonked into a new young shiny metal bin. The bin was a has-been.